All right, I guess we can get this thing started. Last night was the vice presidential debate between current Vice President Mike Pence and California Senator Kamala Harris. This debate was kind of a breath of fresh air to me. It was really great not to see both candidates basically yelling at each other uninterrupted and the moderator continuing to yell at both of them. There were some other things along with this debate too. The format was a bit weird. It felt quick, trying to just keep moving throughout the entire debate. Both candidates basically said a lot of things that kind of clicked with me. I saw a bunch of patterns, I saw some behavioral stuff. So in this video, I wanted to basically go over my thoughts on the vice presidential debate. This is going to be kind of similar to the presidential debate that I just made previously. It will be shorter. I can promise that. I'm not going to go into every single issue, every single topic that they talked about, just because that's a massive constraint on time. I'm just going to be talking about the candidate's performance overall. Going to be looking into what I thought of the moderator and the format. That said, I guess we can start with the format and what I think of it. Overall, the overall thoughts on the debates and the format, I thought that there was a kind of switching of personalities. I thought that Pence was the more reserved one, didn't really speak up too much. Very big contrast to Trump. And then you have someone like Kamala Harris, who is very inherently aggressive, very opposite of Biden, I would say. Harris was not aggressive to the degree that Trump was in the first presidential debate. Still, it was very noticeable that she was coming off pretty aggressively. And I thought that the format was pretty decently weird. They had 10-minute time slots for 9 topics, and they wanted basically 2 minutes of people explaining their intros on the topic, then going into a couple of questions and maybe a little bit of back and forth. But that never really actually transpired. Because of so many topics were covered, it allowed little time for any kind of responses between the candidates, and there was almost no pushback from the moderator. The moderator would almost ask a question, whether it be a softball or a hardball question, and then she'd move straight into the next question, which I think is kind of a bad way to have a debate. I think you need a little bit of pushback in order to get a solid answer out of candidates. I think that just because of the format and the necessity to cover as many topics as possible lent to that. There wasn't that much substance, I felt, in this debate. Yeah, that's kind of what I think about the format and the overall atmosphere of the debate. Before I get into Mike Pence, I found this really neat graphic, this really neat kind of an analysis from NBC News that goes into the speaking times and the interruptions and attacks from each candidate. In total, from this thing, there were all the topics. It was Trump, COVID-19, economy, Biden, Supreme Court, race, foreign policy, the election, climate change, tax reform, vice president, healthcare, crime, China, abortion, and voting. Those are all the topics in the amount of time that it took to talk about them. Of all the time spoken, Mike Pence talked for about 30 minutes and 8 seconds, and Kamala Harris talked for about 34 minutes and 16 seconds. That's kind of important to note for this. A lot of people were talking about interruptions, taking back time, about responses. I saw a bunch of people saying that Mike Pence is basically hogging the horn. I saw the same thing for Kamala Harris, hogging the horn. In the end, it looks like that Kamala got the most speaking time out of anyone. Oh, and they also talked about attacks and interruptions. Kamala Harris made 84 attacks, Mike Pence made 93, Kamala Harris made 9 interruptions, and Pence made 16. Not in comparison to what I tallied from last week. Still a decent amount of interruptions. And one thing too, the moderator was trying to interrupt many times in order to get the candidates to stop going on their monologues, stop talking about this kind of stuff in order to move on to the next question. I already said this. Mike Pence would be on his long monologue talking about healthcare or something. And as he was trying to finish his monologue, the moderator would cut in and say, "Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you, Vice President Pence." Just trying to get him to stop so that she could ask Kamala Harris the same question or something along those lines. But now we can talk about Mike Pence. No surprises here. I thought he did really well. Just a couple of behavioral things and a thing that he brought up during the debate. I noticed that he said thank you a lot to every single moderator question that was asked, coming across as again a calm personality, cool and collected, pretty respectful. I don't think that he was being an asshole in a very noticeable way. I don't even think that's in his nature. He brought up Kamala Harris's record in multiple ways. Talked about her co-sponsoring the Senate version of the Green New Deal. She was one of the 10 senators to oppose the USMCA, which is the NAFTA replacement. He brought up her record as a California prosecutor and attorney general, which I think is hilarious. Brought up incarceration rates and stuff along those lines, which I absolutely think is very funny. He asked Harris as well about court packing, and he actually got an answer out of that, although it was a bit of a non-answer and a segue. I was just surprised that Harris brought up very concretely, you want to talk about court packing? Sure, let's talk about court packing. Even though she didn't answer the question, it was still interesting to see that Pence basically pushed her buttons enough in order to get something concrete out of that. Oh, and there was other times when that happened too. Prodded her on increasing taxes, banning fracking, to where Harris had to make a very concrete statement saying Joe Biden is not not going to increase taxes on people making under $400,000 a year. He's not going to ban fracking. And I think there were a couple of other claims, but those were the two that really stuck out to me. When Pence was like asked some hardball questions, I felt he gave pretty good answers. Questions were, why are wealthy countries doing better at COVID response? The VP answered, the U.S. implemented testing and sent out supplies really quickly. They banned China travel and they started vaccine development. When asked about presidential tax and health transparency, said that Trump has released his health records and Trump has also released stacks on stacks of financial records the public is able to easily reference. Like the question on like the peaceful transfer of power, which Trump says like, oh, the election is rigged because of mail-in voting or whatever. Pence said, we will win. There was no peaceful transfer of power back in 2016, which I felt like was a little bit of deflection or like whataboutism. In some sense it is true. Like Hillary Clinton never really let go of the election, told people to like never concede. That was like the advice that she gave to Joe Biden, something along those lines. The other questions I thought he handled pretty well. The fault of the format, he was continually trying to finish up his thoughts on the previous topic. Hence, a couple of times he was trying to finish up his thoughts from the previous topic, just because, 2 minutes isn't a lot of time to like basically sum up your entire thoughts. And with the speed of this debate format, the 9 topics in 10 minutes each, that really didn't lend well to him like easily finishing up his thoughts. So he had to use his time for the next topic in order to kind of catch up, which was a bit unfortunate. Next, we'll talk about Kamala Harris. No question, in my mind, no surprises here. I definitely thought that she did worse. In case you didn't know, she was one of my least favorite Democratic primary candidates. I just thought that she came off as like disingenuous. I really didn't like a lot of her policies. She had like a couple of similarities to Joe Biden, like debating last week. There were many times where she just looked like straight into the camera, the same as Joe Biden did, to like address the viewer. She was mostly talking about Trump's failures than about Biden's successes. Didn't really pull up on like Joe Biden's record too much. I think she referenced like economic recovery like back during the Obama and Biden admin. And I understand why that latter point like exists. I was talking to a friend of mine and it absolutely clicked. Like, this election is a referendum on someone, and the Biden campaign is trying to make it a referendum on Trump, which is decently easy to do because you can just, like, pull from the COVID stuff that's happening right now. 200,000 dead, like, many cases, like, hospitalizations, people losing healthcare, a lot of bad things that are going on in the Trump admin. It's a pretty good strategy to just pull on Trump's failures and prove that, like, he's, like, not the best candidate for this, than to really prop yourself up, which is, like, kind of a hard thing to do. I wish that people would prop themselves up instead of like tear other people down, but I can't be so optimistic about something like that. Again, I referenced this earlier. She made some very concrete claims about Joe Biden, specifically not raising taxes on people making less than $400,000 a year, not banning fracking. I don't know about the veracity of these claims. I'm sure that they're going to get fact-checked like sometime soon. Pence basically retorted to say that, oh, he is like going to raise taxes because he's going to remove the Trump tax cuts, going to ban fracking regardless, going to put on these different taxes and regulations, like a GND style climate change reform bill. So there was like a bit of pushback there. I am looking to see like if someone actually like fact checks those claims that Kamala Harris made about the taxes and the frack. I felt that she gave like kind of non-answers to a few of the moderator questions. Questions being, would raising taxes put the economy at risk in the pandemic? And is the Green New Deal a good framework for addressing climate change? Those are sort of the questions that were asked, just like a basic summary, and that just goes back to my whole thing. Oh, she made these very concrete claims about what she's doing, but like when she was responding to the questions from the moderator, she didn't really respond to those questions. What did she say about the taxes? So she said that Biden measures health of the economy by looking at the workers and families. Trump measures health of an economy by how rich people are. Biden is going to invest in the American people, infrastructure, renewable energy, and innovation. Didn't really talk about like increasing taxes that much. Didn't explicitly say that we're going to raise taxes for the top percentage of like income earners. Yeah, she didn't address the tax question that well, I felt. And for the Green New Deal, she again said like Biden's not going to ban fracking. 7 million new jobs predicted than Trump, which are mostly in renewable energy sectors, trying to achieve net zero emissions and be carbon neutral. She didn't really reference the Green New Deal at all. Her record on it, her co-sponsor of it, how similar it is to the like actual Green New Deal, and like the fact that it's on Biden's website saying that it's like a good framework from which to build off of. She didn't really answer that, and I'm kind of not surprised that she didn't, because those are decently tough questions for her to answer. On other questions like what will Biden do in a pandemic, what is American leadership supposed to be, and was justice done to Breonna Taylor, I think that she answered them like pretty sufficiently. Like she just gave like some kind of plan, some kind of vision, some kind of ideal, just to answer those questions, which they're softball questions. They were pretty easy to answer. Not surprised that like she gave pretty good answers, or pretty all right answers for that. And then the oh my god, the biggest cop out of the night, I felt. So she was asked if Biden and her would pack the court if Amy Coney Barrett was appointed. and Biden won the election. So this was basically asked by Pence. My God, this is the best question that he possibly could have asked her for like the response that she gave. She says that the courts and recent appointments by Trump are entirely ideological because they're like life services. You're on the court for life, and you're basically able to impose ideological framework on people your entire life while you're on that court. And I kind of thought that she was going to get into like a term limit argument, but like at the beginning of this question, she's like, oh, you want to talk about court packing? I'll tell you about court packing. So like Trump's packing the court with like all these like nasty ideologies that are basically ruining Americans. And then she points to possibly the stupidest thing that she possibly could have ever said, opposite to the entire point of this question. She says that of the 50 or so Court of Appeals appointments that Trump has made during his term, not one of them was black. That doesn't matter. In my very humble opinion, I think that when you're put on the court, you're there to like follow the like letter of the law. You're supposed to interpret the law. It doesn't really matter if you're black or not, so long as you have some kind of rigid understanding of the law and what it's supposed to mean. I think that that's the most important thing. You can easily point to someone like Clarence Thomas, who's like the black SCOTUS justice. He's an originalist. He's like probably one of the most like far ideological right-leaning people on the court, which again, doesn't matter. He's black, but like he's an originalist. He is a textualist. He's trying to interpret the letter of the law as it was written, not how ideological interpreters of the law, like left-wing people, are like trying to say what the law is supposed to mean instead of what it actually is. So I just thought that her point on saying that, oh, none of the 50 Court of Appeals appointments that Trump has made, none of them are black, that just doesn't matter. It was just so frustrating to see that come out, because like being black has nothing to do of like making the right or wrong choices in something. It has nothing to do with like the integrity of our justice system. I think when it comes to something like racial representation in our systems of politics, I think that that's at least some kind of point that you could make. Obviously you want like a diverse population, wants like kind of diverse representatives from like all walks of life. But I think all walks of life doesn't necessarily mean black or white or like Asian or Mexican or whatever. It doesn't matter like what people's like race is. What matters is like people's experiences, and that can come from like all different kinds of races. There are poor white people, there are rich black people. I feel that like if you just want to keep polarizing yourself and saying that like, oh, not one of the Court of Appeals people like was black, it's just like you're just increasing the racial divide. It shouldn't matter if the dude's black. It should matter if he's doing a good job or not. So yeah, I thought that was like quite possibly the dumbest answer that she has given the entire night. And I guess to wrap up, Kamala Harris, I thought that her demeanor is incredibly off-putting and borderline sarcastic. Like she just comes off across as better than you. I remember she's just like kind of like posturing, like putting herself like, oh, Mr. Vice President, can you let me speak? Obviously, like, Pence is trying to get in some kind of response, and maybe he shouldn't be trying to, like, directly interrupt Harris when she's speaking and, like, in a monologue. She just has that kind of, like, attitude and behavior that is just so incredibly off-putting and disingenuous. Like, you're not a real person. You're basically, like, shilling for yourself. You don't really have any kind of beliefs. You're just trying to put yourself in a position of power. You're like an egoist. Your entire moral and political philosophy is entirely based on, like, oh, what is the best thing that I could possibly say to enrich myself? I definitely feel like Kamala Harris, like, comes off across as that, and it was shown in, like, multiple ways during the debate. Let's see. So I guess the last thing that I'll talk about is Susan Page, who's the moderator. I had no idea who Susan Page was going into this, and I still have no idea. I don't really, like, have too strong of an opinion of her. I thought in the beginning she was asking, like, pretty unique questions about the candidates. Like, for the most part, they were pretty big hardballs. As, like, the debate was concluding, she asked basically the same question to both candidates. Maybe that's the fault of the format. Maybe it's not. Like, you're just trying to get, like, the candidates' thoughts on, like, a similar issue, seeing what they're saying. And she kept, like, trying to reclaim time to continue on to the next topic or the next question, and that required cutting the candidates off in the middle of their monologues. Again, that's most likely the fault of the format. I think that this debate had, like, a really bad format in comparison to the last one. I would much rather prefer, like, long stretches of very, very important topics instead of just, like, talking about, like, let's talk about climate change and SCOTUS and all these different things. Let's just pick 3. We can talk about COVID for 30 minutes. We can talk about the economy for 30 minutes. And then we can talk about, I don't know, some kind of wild card for the next 30 minutes. Or just do like random questions. The format, pretty bad. And not a lot of substance is going to be shared there with such a format that is so quick and like needs to have a very specific timeline to get all the things done. But yeah, I think that's my thoughts on the vice presidential debate. Overall, again, I thought it was pretty good. It was refreshing to like see people not yelling at each other. I thought Pence did pretty well. I thought that Kamala Harris did like pretty bad. I wish the format was better, marginally better than what happened last week. And it kind of scares me to say that, oh, there's only one vice presidential debate, so now we have to go back to the presidential debate where they'll go back to yelling at each other. Or who knows, it'll be over a Zoom call and you can just mute Trump for like 20 minutes. Who knows? But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say for this video. Let me know if you like it. Let me know if you have any any other thoughts. If you vehemently disagree about the performance of Pence and Harris, I'd love to hear it. I'm always open to people's perspectives on this, people's opinions. It helps shape what I believe. I like hearing what people have to say. With that said, I guess I'm all good to go. So thank you for watching, and I will catch you hopefully next week.